Today's episode of Voiced is from r/ProRevenge and is about an uncle who takes revenge on his former employer by driving them into bankruptcy, and a worker who gets another employee fired and possibly sent to prison for fraud. Subscribe if you enjoy.
Not sure if this is petty or professional or whatever. You be the judge. My uncle is an Indian doctor. In the 90s, there was a massive doctor's shortage in Australia, so the government gave him citizenship. Unfortunately, you still had to sit 3 expensive exams to work as a doctor in Australia. These exams cost thousands of dollars, only happened twice a year, had limited sitting spots times, and had arbitrary pass-fail marks. So many Indian doctors ended up becoming taxi drivers, small businessmen, etc. My uncle decided instead he would reapply and go through Australian medical school. Sure enough, being a doctor for 10 plus years makes medical school easy, and my uncle was top of his class. He decided, since he was already pushing 40 and had a family, he would apply to become a GP, family physician, instead of applying to be a surgeon like most of his teachers had suggested. At the time, many desperate foreign doctors were applying for GP residency. They would essentially get treated like crap. They would be forced to work unpaid overtime. They would not be given proper study time or leave to sit mandatory exams. They would pocket the meals, accommodation/study, leave allowances that you were supposed to be paid by the training college. They would roster you to work every Saturday, Sunday shift, and if you refused, they would give you a bad review and your training would be jeopardized. This mostly happened to foreign doctors, as most of them would be in bad debt and highly desperate for any sort of work. When my uncle graduated, he applied for GP training in a practice that is located within an Indian ethnic enclave so that he would have access to religious food/schools, etc. for the kids. Sure enough, this practice engaged in all of the above nonsense. My uncle would work every single Saturday shift. During his dedicated study time, he would have to come into work. He got reprimanded for not overcharging patients in line with their framework. Worst of all, when my aunt was really sick and hospitalized, they wouldn't give him any time off to look after her and the kids. The owner of the clinic was a white GP who was openly racist against Indians, Asians, and Aboriginal people, who were a large percentage of the clientele of this clinic. My uncle bided his 3 years, and as soon as his documentation came through, making him a general practitioner, GP, he quit that instant. He went down to the local bank and got a loan to open up his own practice. All his old patients quickly moved with him to the new practice. The first year he struggled, but his practice quickly became known and word spread. Surprise, surprise, foreign-trained doctors actually work well and care about their patients if you actually care about them and give them appropriate wages, living conditions. More patients and more doctors looked to work with my uncle. Within 2 years, my uncle had a GP practice that had 4 doctors, 2 nurses, 2 trainees, and a manager. His practice easily rivaled his original teachers. He then started 2 more GP practices with the money he was pulling in. These practices trapped his old teacher's clinic in a 2-kilometer triangle. He would advertise heavily and make sure he could take as much business from his old teacher as he could. Within 5 years, his old teacher's practice went from hiring 6 doctors, 4 nurses, and 6 trainees to just 1 doctor, his old teacher, and no one else. His old teacher tried to sell up his practice to other doctors, but no one would purchase it, given how successful my uncle's 3 surrounding practices were. He then tried to sell it to my uncle, who refused to buy even at a ridiculously low sale price. Instead, he waited for the bank to repossess his old teacher's clinic and then purchased it for a bit more money from the bank. My uncle then repurposed the building into his main offices from where he runs his other 3 practices. He made sure to redevelop his old boss's room into staff toilets, just as one final tribute to the human turd that was his old boss. He is such a generous guy in real life. He didn't even expand any further apart from those 3 clinics. I'm pretty sure the land value of the clinics is worth more than the doctor's business in them nowadays.
Wow, talk about a twist of fate, from an uncle turning the tables on his former employer to, well, let's find out what happens next. Imagine being stuck in a job where boredom is your constant companion. One night shift receptionist found a unique way to turn that boredom into something far more exciting. Let's dive right in and see how this story unfolds.
Was bored at work, so got a guy fired and possibly sent him to prison for fraud. I work the night shift as a receptionist at a hotel in Norway, and most nights are spent watching Netflix playing games. Last summer was really slow, and I also worked a lot extra, so I ran out of stuff to watch and games to play. One night I got an email from Scooter. He wanted to book a room for almost 20 days. I just had to send him the price and confirmation that we had rooms available, and he would then send me his credit card info for me to pre-charge. Normally, we just delete these kinds of emails, but I was bored out of my mind, so I responded with an offer for around $2,000 for the entire stay. Also made sure to inform him that he could cancel for free up until the day of arrival. This is probably the most common fraud attempt in the hotel travel industry. Unlike most businesses, we are able to charge credit debit cards with only the card number and expiration date. No need for a PIN code, CVV, or other authentication methods. Our software also allows us to deposit money directly into local and international bank accounts by using the card number. Because of this, individuals like Scooter will try to prepay with stolen skimmed cards, but then cancel the booking and ask us to refund the amount to a different card. A couple of hours after sending him the offer, he responded with a Visa number and told me to charge him as soon as possible. I checked the card with our validation software, and to my big surprise, it did not belong to Scooter. If validation succeeds, it will return with the card owner's name 90% of the time. I sent him a new email stating that the card was declined because of insufficient funds. He quickly replied and gave me a new card to try. Guess what? This one didn't belong to Scooter either. It wasn't even the same person as the first card. By checking the BIN codes, the first 6 digits, I found which banks had issued the cards. They weren't even issued in the same country. My plan was to just call the banks and inform them of the attempted scam, but there were still several hours before I could go home, so I decided to mess with Scooter a bit more. Sent him a reply that the second card went through, and also the reference number for his stay at our hotel. As expected, a couple of hours later, Scooter sent an email canceling the order and asked if we could refund the money to a different card, as he had lost his wallet and deactivated the card he paid with. This card was issued by a Polish bank. I'm not sure why, but Polish bank accounts are often used by people who want to launder money from bitcoins and drugs. You can buy a legitimate card for around $500 that is registered to some guy or girl in Poland from the darknet. At this point, Scooter was probably pretty happy about the $2,000 he soon would receive. I replied that it was no problem for me to transfer the money to a different card as long as it was valid. How fun would it be to also cancel his own card so that he had to spend $500 for a new one? Not fun enough. In the last email I wrote that he could send me the card number, but that our email server would go down for maintenance in a few minutes, so my boss would do it on Monday. It was now Saturday morning, so enough time for the charged bank to call us and reverse the transfer. If he needed the money right away, I told him to call the hotel before I ended my shift at 7 a.m. He called almost immediately, and I wrote down the card number and his phone number. Told him I transferred the money and that it would be in his account by 12 p.m. My shift ended, and I went home with all the information Scooter had provided. Wanted to see if I could find out who he was, and of course this idiot had an open Facebook profile that I found using his phone number. He even listed his address and employer. Looked a bit like the artist Scooter, but with even more messed up face and spiky hair full of gel. He lived somewhere outside of London, in an area I would describe as a British trailer park. Houses that were nice at some point, but where the owners had spent zero on maintenance since it was built. Trash everywhere, and broken windows that were boarded up or fixed by sealing holes with garbage. Now to the fun part. According to his Facebook profile, Scooter worked at a hotel. This meant that he would have access to card information from guests that booked through sites like Booking.com. I called the manager of the hotel and told him there were reasons to believe that one of his employees was trying to commit credit card fraud, and that the card numbers could belong to their guests. I gave him the names of the people who owned the cards Scooter tried to pay with, and to no surprise, both had stayed at the hotel. I told him it was Scooter, and the manager just exploded in anger. Not 100% sure what he said because he was screaming so loud, but I think Scooter wasn't a normal employee. He worked there through some kind of government training program or something. After talking to the manager, I called both Visa and MasterCard International and told them about Scooter's little business venture. Apparently, it's pretty easy to check if there are more cards that have been involved in fraud, where the cards also have been used at Hotel Scooter. With his Polish deposit account info, they would also be able to pin it on Scooter if he had been successful in scamming anyone and sue him for the amount stolen. The police also called me later to get a statement regarding the whole situation, so I know that the manager reported it to the police. Not sure what happened to Scooter, but according to his Facebook profile, he no longer works at the hotel or anywhere else as far as I can see.
Before I talk about today's posts, please consider subscribing for more engaging content like this. Today we have a couple of wild stories. First up, An uncle who not only outsmarts his racist boss, but also ends up bankrupting him by opening successful practices all around his old workplace. It's a tale of resilience and justice, served cold, literally turning the boss's office into staff toilets, is a genius move. And then there's the receptionist, who, bored at work, manages to expose a fraudster and possibly send them to prison. Talk about turning boredom into brilliance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these stories in the comments below. Did you find any of these actions petty or justified? Let's discuss. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Voiced. If you enjoyed daily, high-quality stories, please like and subscribe to show your support.